Welcome to the Power of Culture. I'm Mayassa bint Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani. My nation, Qatar, is on a creative journey, supporting the talents of a rising generation, reaching out to other countries through the arts and building an entire cultural infrastructure. In each episode of The Power of Culture, I'm joined by a leading artist or architect, philanthropist or museum professional who's part of Qatar's journey. Listen in as we discuss what the power of culture can do. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by the Acting Deputy CEO of Museums, Collection and Heritage Protection of Qatar Museum, Sheikha Amna bint Abdulaziz Al Thani. Good morning, Amna. How are you?
A very good morning to you. I'm very well.
So today we're going to talk about you being at the Qatar Museums and the work that's been done over the years. Can you tell us a little bit about how long have you been at the Qatar Museums?
So I've been working at Qatar Museums for over 10 years now, and I've spent most of that time working at the National Museum. And initially, when I started, I worked with a former director, Peggy back in 2013. And then I transitioned into the director's position when Peggy left QM.
Yes, I remember that was, you were shadowing her before she left, and she had come to help us develop the National Museum of Qatar. We opened the National Museum in 2019, as you know. And it's been a very rewarding and challenging experience. It took us around 10 years to rework the galleries until we were able to open. But how did you find working under somebody like Peggy as a Qatari young graduate? You had just graduated, I believe, from graduate school and been working in the banking sector, if I'm not mistaken, before joining.
Yeah. I think the experience was definitely very rewarding, and it was very different than my previous experience because I come from a banking background, and even my education background is very interdisciplinary. So it was very rewarding in that I enjoyed the human aspect of museums because it's about people and it revolves around, visitors and experiences. And also from Peggy, I gained a lot because the one thing that she's taught me very well is that what I will learn working at a museum is not something that I can attain, from any degree, because it involves a lot of human skills and soft skills that you will only attain once you are on the ground and you're engaging with different teams and different expertise of staff that you work with.
Yeah, and you've done an incredible job developing a lot of talent. I see a lot of Qataris who are now working either at the National Museum or other museums, as you know. And tell me a little bit about what you think one has to pursue or be interested in to be able to work in the museums and then take on leading positions within the organization. As you know, we have 4 museums in the pipelines and a lot of talent to develop. Like, what does it take?
Yeah. I actually get this question a lot, like, what is the right degree or what is the right set of degrees? And to be honest, there isn't one fixed set of degrees. You can start with any degree. You can start with a human sciences degree, with a natural science degree. And then it really depends where one, finds herself or himself in let's say, for example, if you want to grow curatorially, then you would go into more of a specialist degree to develop into that. For example, we have the case of Tanya Al-Majid, who started off with an arts degree and then did the UCL Masters, and now she's decided she wants to go into a curatorial position, and she's pursuing a specialist, PhD with Qatar University now that looks at human sciences, sociology, anthropology, and she wants to grow into the director of curatorial position. So that's for that. And then let's say, for example, someone like me who's come from a business, English, and sociology background, I shadowed the director for some time, and for me, naturally, content, I knew I wanted to go into more of a managerial administrative position. So for me, it was more of focusing on processes and understanding what is the process of developing a museum and seeing patterns in development and really trying to understand scale of projects and how you can execute. So it really depends on the individual and then finding your interest and then taking it from there.
Also, there's high school dropouts that have done really well at the museum. So it's also, the industry allows for people with degrees and people without degrees. I feel like the most important thing is really passion for knowledge and passion for being with people and communicating. Would you agree with that?
Yes, definitely. And this is the the beauty of this museum world is that it's very accommodating. You can be a high school dropout. And actually, I do have an example of that in the museum. We've have, a few locals that were high school dropouts. And what they've done is they've come in, they've started as tour guides, and now they've decided to specialize and go back to school. And then you find your interest in the museum because they have excellent communication skills. So yes, it is a very accommodating world.
Yeah, and I remember also in the Museum of Islamic Art, we had a Qatari boy who started off as a registrar, an art handler, and then he became one of our best art handlers. And he went to community college at the same time and then graduated from university. And actually now he's been hired by a private company that deals with art handling. So I think it's a great way also to allow people to segue into the private sector if they wanted to. But let's go back to the National Museum. This was a project you began from the very beginning. When you joined us, it was a very challenging museum because we wanted to talk about the museum's past, present, future. And you were very involved in all the workshops that we developed with different stakeholders in society, the oral histories that we collected and still want to collect. What do you think the biggest challenges you faced with the Qatar National Museum?
For me, certainly the biggest challenge, and I assume, you're referring to the development phase here, was the expectation of the stakeholders of what constitutes a museum and what is to be presented and exhibited, because they had such high standards to base from. Because, we had a national museum, back in the 70s, which was regarded one of the best in the region. For me, if it was one affirmative thing, it would definitely be the production of the museography was the most challenging phase, and actually took the longest to finalize before we went into the opening.
And I think for the listeners who've never been to Qatar, who haven't visited the National Museum, let's talk a little bit about the museography, why it was challenging. We don't really have straight walls. We came up with this idea of projecting films and having the objects in the middle, and there are so many different arguments of how to do it. Say a little bit more about the installations in the end and how it all works together.
Yeah. So in addition to obviously the intellectual part of developing the content and mapping it out to the different galleries, there was obviously a physical challenge because obviously the architecture is very complicated. Our art films are bespoke. They only can be played and viewed in the museum because they were made for these walls that are not box size or not parallel. So that was one thing, is getting the art films to work in that space. And we had no other space to actually prototype them. So we had to wait for these walls to be built in order to see them. And as you know, Qatar is a very humid country, so the heat with the projectors was something we had to keep on, adjusting to get the film smoothly running. So that was one of the technical challenges we had. Also, in the lighting was because of the museum doesn't have a lot of windows. We had to adjust the lighting to a certain degree to allow for harmony across, the exhibition, the films, and also the conditions of these objects. So it was a huge creative challenge, and a lot of detail was put into the sound in the museum, and it's something that visitors or people don't even know. And we had to create a sound clock for the museum, so whereby the visitor would walk from one gallery to the next, and in that certain moment they would experience a certain sound. And we had a lot of, consultants, experts from all around the world help us achieve this state of perfection over the last 10 years.
I was with Miranair the other day and we were recalling her film. Her film was the first film, Nefes, that was delivered 2 years, I think, before the museum actually opened. And she was talking about the warehouses and the editing and all the challenges that we had to go through, but it was very rewarding, I would say. What did you find, and most rewarding in this whole experience of working on the museum, the National Museum of Qatar, from the very, very beginning to the very end, and now seeing the amount of visitors and school children that come through? It's internationally recognized as an icon, a landmark of Qatar. The Desert Rose signifies a cultural identity. What do you find most rewarding about this experience? So,
as I mentioned earlier, for me, especially, coming in from a business background and transitioning to a museum, what attracted me initially and what I still find very fascinating is the human aspect in everything in the museum world. Everything happens, around people and for people, and museums are meeting places where you can start a journey. And the journey is not necessarily just a physical one through galleries and watching films. It can be a metaphysical journey where you see something and then it reminds you something. It reminds you of something else. It can remind you of your family. It can remind you of something you've learned as a child in history or art. There's no limitation to where your mind can take you in a museum, or what you can think or react to things you see. So in essence, it's about people, and it's the accessibility of what is being exhibited.
Yeah, and I think also the exhibitions, the temporary exhibition space allows us to delve into so many topics and subjects that are of interest for the quality of life of people, for the empowerment in terms of knowledge, like the dugong exhibition. I notice a lot of more people in society are very much aware of the dugong, which I didn't see in the past. I don't know if you feel the same.
Oh, for sure. I mean, people didn't know that dugongs existed. I mean, for some, before we had the exhibition. Now you have it as part of the curriculum. We did a lot of materials that that engage with younger audiences, and definitely there has been an interest in the dugong exhibition. Even
and the recently installed Jeff Koons dugong, I think, has gotten a lot of attention worldwide, and Ahmed Bahrani, also dugongs in Al Ruwais, has also gotten a lot of visits recently. So we're going to continue, right? We have an upcoming exhibition in the environment with Oliver Eliason. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And because the sustainability, the environment, and quality of life is, one of the key messages of the National Museum. So we touch upon these high points in different exhibitions. So Oliver, our exciting exhibition is going to be coming up soon. And it's a very interesting exhibition because it communicates public art with a permanent installation that's going to be with a permanent exhibition. So the interesting thing is the dialogue between his artwork, Safar, and he's going to have an infography wall that's in the exhibition in 2023. For me, what I think this is going to be engaging is that the artist is working so hard to create dialogue between heritage and art. And I think this is something that we've not explored yet in any of our exhibitions. So this is something definitely exciting to come.
Yeah, speaking about heritage, we've also just launched the Ain Muhammad heritage site or old village. And that's become a very popular destination all week long, actually. The developer, Mr. Muhammad Al-Naimi, has been telling us that they've gotten visitors, not just the weekends, but every day of the week. And we have Oliver's installation there, but also Simon Fattal and Ernesto Neto. And also Zubara and Jassasiya, Ruwais, all these heritage sites that have been activated in the north makes the north of Qatar a really exciting place to visit. So I really look forward to the exhibition in March of next year. I think it will be another new exhibition from the National Museum that could even travel around the world. But let's talk about the Sports Museum. Recently, you've been promoted as deputy CEO on the museum project. That means you don't just oversee the National Museum as a director, but also the museums that are operational currently, which are Museum of Islamic Art, Madhaf, the AAR Museum of Modern Art, the National Museum, and now the Sports Museum. How is the project different in the Sports Museum compared to the National Museum?
I'd say the project is both similar and different. I mean, it's similar in terms of processes because developing a museum is always, there's a patterns in how you take a project through development, especially museums, but it's different in terms of scale. And it was different in terms of my role because when I joined the National Museum, my role was, especially in the final development stages, it was very managerial and administrative because I had to do a lot of the day-to-day work, whereas my experience with the Sports Museum was at a very high strategic level in terms of how to get things mobilized for the execution of it. So the role was different and the scale was different, but the process is pretty much identical.
Qatar has a whole history of hosting international competitions and local competitions. It's really a very popular destination. We just opened the last gallery, as you know, on Qatar's history. And it's quite amazing to see how much was done very early on in Qatar with regards to sports. And I think we always say sports and culture are two sides of the same coin. And I'm very pleased to see how people have engaged with the Sports Museum very, very quickly. You also were involved with the rehanging of the Museum of Islamic Art Galleries, and also our newly established relationship with the Metropolitan Museum, who, as you know, have taken a lot of care for the Islamic art collections that they own and really promote our culture in the Americas. Do you want to say a little bit more about the MIA galleries and the rehanging and how that has evolved since we've opened the museum back in 2009?
Yeah, I think for the MIA, the museum has had completed its first decade, and what we wanted was to add more interpretive elements to the museum and make it a bit more modern than a classical museographic approach. And it's something that's internationally has gained a lot of attention. There's a global view on Islamic art and how it should be presented. And we felt, having this unique museum on Arab land, we wanted to give it a more deeper voice with interpretation instead of just having it more focused on regions. Now the museum is more thematic and it extrapolates the stories of objects across shared regions and shared histories. So this is something that we aimed to achieve in this rehanging.
And now we're working on the Lusail Museum. We're hoping to start the construction in 2023 to celebrate 50 years of Qatar-Swiss relations. And for this occasion, we've prepared 4 exhibitions as Qatar Museums, but also the Doha Film Institute have organized an exhibition called Intaj, whereby a lot of loans from Lusail's museums can be seen there in relationship to film and media. We'll talk a little bit about the 2 main exhibitions for the Lusail Museum. Can you say a little more about that?
Absolutely. So for the Lusail Museum, we have 2 big exhibitions. One is Lusail Museum, Tales of a Connected World, and it's about ideas, the history of ideas. And the exhibition is very interesting in that not only it tells a story of Orientalism through various meeting points, the story has an interesting angle, and that is the founder, Sheikh Jassim, who is the anchor point of the new museum. The museum will be located in Lusail, and we're working with the world-famous architects, Herzog de Meuron, who will be developing the architecture. The exhibition showcases some of the themes that will be explored in the museum, whilst giving the visitors an introduction to the architecture and introducing the story of Sheikh Jassim in Lusail and his interesting meeting points that he has had there. That was the main flagship exhibition. The next exhibition is about Al Jazeera, and it talks about the journey of Al Jazeera and how it started from its inception and how it got started. And it was the vision of His Highness, the Father Amir, Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa, and how it went through the development and became one of the renowned networks in the Gulf, emanating from Qatar. And it also talks about the advanced technology that the network uses to enable visitors to enjoy the channel and the network. So these are the 2 main flagship exhibitions. And then we have 2 other exhibitions that talk more about close-up topics. And one is about Palestinian embroidery, and it's called Labor of Love. This exhibition is an exciting collaboration with the Palestinian Museum. And it talks about Palestinian embroidery and voices from Palestine. It shows a lot of identities through embroidery work. And the final exhibition is the Raku exhibition, and it's about these bespoke collection of tea bowls that were developed as an inspiration by Sheikh Jassim's poetry and Qatar. The main message in this exhibition is the fascination with the Orient and calligraphy and poetry and how different artists from around the world have reacted to this fascination. So we have this amazing offer of 4 exhibitions that, talk to different themes and narratives that we hopefully will explore and exhibit in our museum, Lusail.
And how do you think these exhibitions prepare our audiences on the future museography of the museum? I mean, the exhibition at Al Ruwaq, Tales of a Connected World, is quite fascinating for visitors to see the diversity in the collections within the museums, the architecture, the evolution of it as it changed location and the size and redesigning of the spaces to fit our collections. But also the connection to, as you said, the Lusail heritage houses of the founder, Sheikh Jassim bin Mohammed. I think making that connection, and also from a timeline point of view, makes it relevant to Qataris, to residents, to understand where we were during this period of time and what we were doing. So, how do you think the museography that's been currently shown will help people imagine the future of the Lusail Museum?
Yeah, I think the Lusail Museum will bring a very interesting aspect to it, and that is the heritage connection to the museum. Like, you have these classical museums where you have objects, and it's either about art or ethnography, but here the interesting thing is, yes, it is about art, but it's also about history, heritage, and identity. The museum, in essence, is about ideas around movement and travel. So by default, once people visit the museum and they are at Lusail, they'll be interested, to explore Al Wajba Fort, because Al Wajba Fort is also something that's very much part of the DNA of the story of Lusail and Sheikh Jassim. And it will be an emanating museum to other heritage sites, but also to our other museums, because once they've learned about Sheikh Jassim and Lusail, they might want to go to the National Museum and learn more and explore, for example, the story of Wajba, because it's dealt at length at the National Museum. What we're trying to do here is create complementary experiences with our different museums, where one highlights one story, the other is more about an in-depth tale of a theme. So over the next 8 years in development, we will be prototyping a lot of the themes, narratives, and in parallel, we are developing our heritage sites. And this is a huge exercise that we've started for the World Cup, but it'll carry over the next 10 years. And we're working on a full 10-year plan to integrate museology with the heritage and also our general collections.
I mean, it's quite interesting, right? The National Museum of Qatar has the Sheikh Abdullah bin Jassim, the son of the founder's palace, at the center of it. And then here, the Lusail Museum, as it sits alone on Al Maha Island, will also connect the houses of Sheikh Jassim bin Mohammed, the founder, but it's not physically connected to the museum. However, it allows for the visitor to experience Lusail as our future city as a whole. I find that really interesting. I don't know if you want to say more about that.
I mean, as we mentioned, this is all part of our heritage development, and building the whole identities of the various, heritage sites. And Lusail itself, once we have the museum there, yes, they're not physically connected, but thematically, people will know more about Lusail, like how they now know more about the palace of Sheikh Abdullah bin Jassim, because the National Museum, is built around it. And we've sustained, the roots of the story and the roots of the old National Museum by developing the new one around the old. And similarly with Lusail, by developing our new established museum around the palaces of Sheikh Jassim, we will really build on these themes and stories of the whole neighborhood. And we will also, as a team, learn more as we develop and research the areas, because we're doing also a lot of excavations around some of these areas. And there's definitely a lot to come out over the next decade about Sheikh Jassim and Lusail. And the research on the encounters that he's had there, because we found out there were a lot of delegations that had, meetings there. And it's something that is very exciting to find out and develop a museum around.
And this kind of reminds me a little bit about the vision of the National Museum of Qatar. When we started, it was always about having an emanating museum of the 21st century, where visitors could go through the museum, and with one visit, they get a snapshot of Qatar. And from there, they could travel around the country, see whatever they wanted, whether it's heritage site, beaches, natural reserves. And so I feel like Lusail has the same philosophy, only it focuses on the founder of Qatar, Sheikh Jassim bin Mohammed, and also the history of Lusail, which we've learned that there's so much to research and excavate. And I find that this really falls very nicely with our Qatar blueprint, which we are working on, which has zoned the country into 7 or 8 parts. We're yet to decide. But don't you think the plan for the blueprint in terms of workshops and community engagement reminds you of the National Museum of Qatar? I think when we began, it was like experimental. We would, set up some workshops, some would work, some would not, but then build on it. So you're very much involved in that. What do you think about the parallels between the blueprint and the planning of the National Museum?
That's a really good question. I think the blueprint, like the National Museum, and albeit at a much larger scale, builds on the interrelation of sites and the mapping of concepts, their relevance, history, and the environment of each, respective site. I believe that the blueprint, is based on an inclusive approach that aims to take into consideration the past and plan built on the future of the country. It aims to support coordination of all the resources for a sustainable, future. And of course, at the heart of the country's resources are the communities. And what the National Museum has mentioned earlier, there was a huge exercise of community engagement in getting them to, gauge and record what they want to see in their own national museum. So I would say the similarity is the community engagement. And as we saw earlier with the example of Muhammad Hassan al-Naimi, who was involved in the development of Ain Muhammad, the community element is definitely a shared point. I think that the big difference is the scale of it and the process of mapping, because here you're mapping sites to themes, and in the museum it's about mapping galleries to themes. So, but definitely there's a lot of similarity, and we as a team are currently, undergoing this exercise of developing both in parallel and trying to see these common points, because as I mentioned earlier, we're developing our museums and our heritage strategy and also our collections at the same time. And this all interconnects with what we're trying to communicate to the community and our audiences.
And that's a nice way to talk about our Dedu Museum, which is a children's museum, right? And all the different playgrounds that we've developed over the years. One that we're opening very soon at the National Museum, which is a Total Energy Playground. Let's talk first about Dedu, the children's museum, which we will be opening on the 19th of November. As you know, the 20th of November is the UN Children's Day. So it's a very exciting moment for us. And the Dedu Gardens, again, is the first phase of our children's museum, with the building hopefully beginning very soon, designed by UN Studio. And tell me a little bit about how Dedu as a museum fits within all of our existing museum ecosystem. At the National Museum, almost every other gallery has a children play area. We've included a family trail in the reopening of the Islamic Art Museum, and our future museums looks at families, as Qatar, as you know, is a big family community and a family destination. Say a little bit more about the Dedu Museum.
The Dedu Museum is, as I mentioned earlier, it's all of our museums complement each other, and the experiences are complementary. Dedu is about learning through play, and it's about intergenerational learning in families. So it's very similar to our other museums in its focus, as family and communities, but it's different in that there are no objects in the Dedu Museum. It's all about hands-on STEAM learning and experiencing learning with your children, and it's about inviting the family to become part of this experience and enjoy the museum. It's not about entertainment, it's education, learning, and experience. And we wanted to create this thing in a bespoke museum, such as the Children's Museum that we aim to have.
I'm really excited about the edible garden and the outside kitchen for children and families alike, for parents to be empowered about healthy eating, and that really connects with our sports museum, of which we're trying to promote healthy lifestyle and active living. But let's go back to the National Museum, as I think we're opening the Total Energy Playground, which energy, Qatar is one of the largest energy producers in the world, and it was very important for us to teach children about the energy sector, as they played the same philosophy as Dedu, learning through play. And we're opening it soon, very soon, next week, I think. And we also have the Cave of Wonders and the Naqilat Adventure Ship. Talk a little bit about these playgrounds and, why they were so important as part of the National Museum DNA, but also the identity of children who are growing up and visiting, whether they're visiting the playgrounds or the museum, why it was so important for us.
I think the playgrounds has been a very exciting, and rewarding process. What we tried to do, in addition to our galleries and our family spaces, we wanted to have outdoor spaces that allowed for free play, but also kids and families could experience things that they've seen in the galleries, but with the focus of more tactile element and allow for more freedom in terms of scale and movement. The first playground we opened was the Cave of Wonders, and it is inspired by the Qatari Dahel, which is an underground rocky cave. And there children can explore a realistic representation of an underground rocky cave and wander freely, discover the space, climb, crawl, and hide amongst rocks. The kids would experience glowing rocks, carvings, and rock artifacts hidden under sands and hanging bats on the ceiling. And we also have our giant gecko there. So that's for the Cave of Wonders. The Naqilat adventure ship is a ship that's constructed like a wreck of a traditional Qatari boat. And the process of development was so exciting. We actually went and found pieces of a real dhow to try to recreate, and we used the authentic material. And there kids can learn about pearling, fishing, trading, and also it has an audio element. So at night there are projections, and there's an audio songs and there's also underneath the ship a cargo that kids can play with, and it's like a treasure box. And we hope through that children will learn about Qatari history and culture in a very fun and light way. The third playground is yet to be opened, as you mentioned, very soon, and it's the Qatar Total Energies playground. It's sponsored by Total Energies. This provides a unique experience with a message on sustainability and energy, and it talks about the country's history and future. It is definitely more than a playground in its experience. It prompts children to learn about sustainability through tactile elements, and also through going through the pods. They would see what goes inside these energy pods. And it also talks, and we hope that it makes kids think about the future and sustainability and what energy has done to this country and its transformation. So these are our three main playgrounds that we have.
We also wanted to be very specific, right? Like, for example, the Cave of Wonders, we just opened or reopened the Dahal Misfar with the Minister of Environment, and we kind of we try to show the children all the different caves that are in Qatar, their names, their locations, so they can go visit them. And then the Naqilat adventure ship, it was really modeled after Hama bin Jabr. And for us, it was really important to put these names in our children's vocabulary so that they know about local personalities or regional personalities, as well as locations. And, I think this allows us to speak about the Alpha Fountain designed by Jean-Michel Othaniel. It animates the lake outside the National Museum. Talk a little bit about the process of the calligraphy and the whole installation.
The Alpha Fountain, it was very exciting, and it's in dialogue with architecture. It's placed in parallel to the building, and it consists of 114 fountain sculptures consisting of Arabic calligraphy. And the sculpture arises along 900-meter long shores of the lagoon, and you can see it from various angles, walking from the Carnegie, from inside the museum. And the artwork itself is like these gigantic, shiny beads that really show the beauty of Arabic calligraphy because they're inflated in a larger-than-life size. And it beautifully accentuates, the building. And you can see it from afar, just driving from the Corniche or from inside. It definitely is in dialogue. And it also is in dialogue with the Museum of Islamic Art because it's about the beauty of handwriting and calligraphy. So it definitely is one. And it's actually the first artwork that you see depending from where you come to the museum. So the experience is a very nice one. And it creates also a beautiful photo moment, if you come in. It depends from where you see it.
Yeah, and we have an amazing Desert Rose Cafe there, don't we, by Nofel Marri, and her food is amazing. It's Qatari cuisine. I know that everybody I take there fall in love with Qatari cuisine because of her cafe. There's another installation there that we should, I think, talk about, because Simone Fattal, we just installed the work in the north of Qatar next to Oliver's at the Ain Mohammed village. And we also have her Jassasiya piece just at the entrance of the National Museum, but also next to Wadha, our first fashion designer who had a proper store where every single person I send there or buy an item from Wadha's store, admire the work, the talent, the Islamic geometry that she uses is in her clothes and the quality of the material. Talk a little bit about this intersection of art, fashion, architecture, and how that creates like the ecosystem for our creatives to flourish.
Yes, and exactly, as you mentioned, for us as QM, we do more than just museums. It's about, creating these dialogue across museum, heritage sites, fashion designers. What we do is we facilitate those big ideas and those big themes, and we've had an interesting response. So for example, like Wadha, she has developed a lot of perfumes, inspired by themes and ideas from the National Museum, but also from heritage in general. And you have Nofal Marri, who has dishes that are named after various Qatari plants and ingredients, but also she's been inspired a lot by the desert rose. So she's also recreated things that resemble the desert rose. She has her own desert rose drink and desert rose cake. And you've got others who have really felt inspired by the different offers and ideas that we presented, as QM. So it's not just about producing museums, but it's about producing creatives and this intersection between all the three aspects. It's collection, museums, heritage, fashion. And it's also about introducing people to really view museums differently. It's not just about, going there and having an experience and looking at objects. They're emanating spaces. You see something, you get inspired, and then you produce something out of it.
Yeah, and I think this really, again, shows how I find my job as a vocation. I don't feel I'm ever working because it empowers so many people and creates so many different creative narratives across the country. And, you just spoke nicely about that. And I want to talk a little bit about the future car museum, the Qatar Auto Museum, that we've installed the first part at the National Museum, Mayassa Gallery. But also now we've just had another installation in heritage sites, from them Barzan Towers, the Zubara UNESCO heritage site, where we've just upgraded it, as you know. And, it was really an exciting moment to showcase cars in reused cases that Seashore worked with us on. But also, we also had the involvement of private sector companies, families who owned, the car dealerships for decades, highly involved in this project. So talk a little bit about the Qatar Auto Museum and, the installations of these cars in the heritage sites, but also at the heart of Doha at the Mayassa Gallery in the National Museum.
Cars is definitely one of the most popular subjects that we've presented at the National Museum, taking us back, from the opening when we had our Mayassa Gallery. And we felt this is something that was important because it talks about our social history. Because cars are also presented at the National Museum as the coming of oil. It's one of those material things that have, arrived to Qatar like the other Gulf countries. So for us, we felt the social history aspect was very important to present, and it's a very popular subject that we talk about. And we felt that for the World Cup, it was something interesting because it's accessible to a lot of audiences and people will relate to it because these cars are manufactured in lots of different countries, right? Germany, France, the US. And with the various years of cultures, we have had cars that were presented that represent these different countries. So for example, when we had the Year of USA, we had a lot of US cars presented at the National Museum, like Dodge and Chrysler and Ford. And it's always a very popular subject. But also in the future, in addition to showcasing the variety and the eclectic collection of cars that we have, we hope to speak about the social aspect of cars. And we also, road traffic accidents is something that we aim to is going to be one of the messages that we talk about in the museum, and safety and well-being. So this in a nutshell summarizes the Auto Museum.
Yeah, and Qatar as a country has really invested, right, in the car industry, whether it's through QIA investing in companies or attracting the Geneva Car Show or the Formula One. So I feel like this museum, connects everything that we're doing as well as engages the research centers, the universities, the designers, the car dealers, and also the activities that evolve around cars. So whether it's the mechanics, the garage, the drag racing, and all of that. So it's quite an exciting time, and it really inspires me to see how involved everybody is in this project. We spoke a little bit about heritage sites, and I know that it was always part of the National Museum vision to connect heritage sites across the country in one trail where visitors can continue on after their visit to the museum, as this is a very important moment for us in the history of Qatar with us being the first country to host the FIFA World Cup. Is there anything you want to say, anything that you want to talk about in terms of heritage sites or recommendations you would want to make to visitors when they come here, in terms of what they can do or not do whilst they visit these archaeological sites?
Absolutely. As I said earlier, for the heritage sites, the World Cup is just the beginning. What we tried to do is add a lot of infography on the site so people would know the history of the site, what it was mainly for. So, for example, Al Jassasiyah site is a site of rock carvings, and they would learn a little bit about the art that's presented there and why is it unique in Qatar. And I would encourage people to go out, after visiting the National Museum or even before, to go to these different sites, learn a little bit about the infography, and then deep dive at the National Museum. And for example, you have Azawara. We added all these boardwalks to enhance the visitor experience. And we made sure that our boardwalks is very accessible to children in terms of, height and scale. And later, early next year, we plan to open our visitor center in Al Zubara. And it's going to be one of the first bespoke, digital galleries to open there and be in dialogue with the National Museum. It's similar in that we talk about the historical importance of Al Zubara, but it's different in that what we try to exhibit here is about the practice of archaeology and how to respect a heritage site and understand what it takes to excavate an object, preserve it, and then present it. So the focus is more on the field than showing ethnographic artifacts, what we have at the National Museum. So the heritage sites are very much in dialogue with the National Museum, but it doesn't recreate what's available at the National Museum. It's different. Here the focus is from the site, and it's more at a high level scale, whereas at the museum the focus is at the object and stories around it, and it talks more about the ethnographic and movement in the story of the people. So definitely I would encourage, families and children to explore these sites and learn about the infography that we have provided to them.
What's really interesting is that a lot of my friends who now have children, when I take them to the heritage sites or the museums, they're really appreciative of what's available for their children, not just as learning spaces or places to engage, but also places to inspire them about what their future could look like and what kind of professions they could get into. So it's really an exciting time for people considering to move to Qatar, or people who are already living here, in terms of what's available to them and their families. And I think this segues nicely into our recent initiative that we can't ignore technology. As important as heritage is and culture, technology plays a very important role today in our children's lives because that's their future. And we've just launched a artificial intelligence workshop with Microsoft, and I know all of our workshops are sold out as soon as we announce them. Talk a little bit about what that is, the workshop, and why do you think, in your point of view, it's important to incorporate technology into our museums?
I mean, for me, it was really, really important to bring in this, co-innovation partnership and commitment with Microsoft that produces, an interdisciplinary learning for the community and integration and engagement. The goal of this was really to accelerate our vision of being an emitting museum and sharing with our audiences a new platform for engagement via, AI. So recently, Microsoft and the National Museum agreed on a knowledge mining partnership where the National Museum is providing the cultural knowledge on museums, and we would co-provide a custom solution built on our QM servers where kids, can explore the galleries, they can recreate some of the material, for example, from the family spaces through AI technology. And the AI Digital Center was one of the key deliverables that we are going to have soon. And it aims to provide a space for children to learn and opportunities to inspire students as an after-school program where they can, explore their interest in AI and coding. However, it's very important to note that this whole collaboration is not about making the museum digital, but it's about the use of digital technology to enhance the museum experience and preserve content and sustain the way how we present it. And Microsoft and its partners will be developing these solutions, working with the ministry, schools, and the National Museum. So we are one of many stakeholders locally that will be working with Microsoft and coding like cars, seems to be a very interesting subject. And it's a nice way also to show children that there are different ways that you can engage with the museums. It's not just only about objects. Experience is another layer of museums and how you can really enjoy them.
Yeah, I really love how we engage with all the different stakeholders and how all basically government entities are now engaged fully with the museums to help them in their own goals, whether it's education, whether it's ecology, whether it's teenagers, whether it's academics and teachers and faculty. So it's really a fascinating time, in my opinion, for Qatar and for the culture sector and the creative economy in particular. And I know that ever since we've opened the National Museum, we've gotten so many requests from all around the world to help them develop their own museums and consult us in terms of how to do things because they found the work we've done quite innovative. Would you like to touch upon that? Because I know you're very involved in that.
We've had a lot, since we've opened, we've had a lot of international collaborations. QM in general has a lot of international collaborations through loans, exhibitions, and also through know-how of museography. But particularly, with the National Museum, since we've opened, we've gotten a lot of questions from international institutions that are in the development phase of how we have devised our museography around this innovative technology that we have at the National. And it's always about how did we integrate it? How did we work with sound? It's all these practical questions of museum development that we often get. And we have a number of collaborations in the pipeline in terms of development. But not only do we work internationally in the development projects, but we also have some exciting collaborations with pre-existing, museums that have been open for many years. For example, like our projects with the Met. It's not only about our collaboration in the Islamic art galleries, but we do have future collaborations on Oriental arts and Lusail, in addition to some learning and outreach programs that we'll have together as a shared platform. We plan on working on a project called Speaking Objects, and it's going to be speaking objects across the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Museum of Islamic Art. And it's about objects speaking about their history, and it's an added layer of experience that you can only experience across the Met and MIA.
And so I think this brings us towards the end of our conversation. And this year is important. We're hosting the FIFA World Cup, as you know, but also we're celebrating the years of culture of Qatar Mayassa, where all of our exhibitions and all of our museums talk about Arab, Islamic history, cultures, and the diversity of our communities. What are you hoping? I know you were involved in different parts, whether it's exhibitions development or preparing the museums to welcome all these visitors. What are you hoping for every visitor to experience here in Qatar?
There's so much on offer, first of all. There's something for everyone in terms of what we have. I'm hoping that people will get to enjoy our museums, visit our heritage sites, and even if they get to do one of the many that we have, I really want them to enjoy it and reflect on the different things that we've tried to portray and communicate. We also have a lot of access in terms of our websites and and infographics that we've offered. There are info packs for people who require more information, and I hope that people get to enjoy all these offers that we put out. And also there's lots and lots of shopping and entertainment, not only our museums and exhibitions and the festivals that we have on. So I wish everyone a nice stay and to enjoy the games.
Thank you, Amna. I'm sure everybody will not only enjoy FIFA, but also the culture. The president of FIFA, President Infantino, said that they've never had a World Cup with so much cultural offerings as this time. So it's a compact games and one that I'm sure everybody will celebrate. So thank you for everything that you've done for the organization and for the development of the community.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this, and it really took me back many years, and it's really exciting and rewarding. And again, I just hope everyone has a nice time and they get to enjoy these offers. And there are lots of catalogs and information, as I said, if anyone needs to go back and look at something. And and we're always here and available to help.
Well, sometimes you have to go into the past to be re-inspired about what the future will hold, as we're definitely celebrating the present. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.